Yeah, if you show me up, it's so long, actually, it's down like this. Yeah, so
We're ready to get started? Everybody? Hi, welcome to the fourth public session for the Gravel Pit Solar Project. Appreciate everyone coming out. I know that's a lot to get everyone together and prepare and provide your comments, but we appreciate all the comments and the fact that everyone's so engaged. Some of you may not have been to the previous sessions. This session we cut back a little bit on the slides just so we have more participation and time for questions. I am Brian Smith from the Energy Advisory Committee. We also have Adam Meyer from the Finance Committee, as well as Select Board Eve Wittenberg, and also Ellen Sachs-Leisher from the Energy Committee. This is a chart table that shows the overall plan for solar in the town and how it compares to the electricity usage. So we have a large increase in solar coming between, this shows from 2025 to 2050. There are a lot of efforts to electrify the buildings, so to eliminate gas usage and replacing it with electric usage. This is an estimate about how that rollout would happen, and that's what's driving a lot of the increase. There are some other increases, but most of it would come from electrification. The approach that we've always had and continue to plan for is to focus on efficiency, so town's energy use, whether it's a building or any other energy use, make sure that we reduce the usage as much as we can, and then electrify those sources. And then what electrification does for you, it allows you to offset that electricity usage with some kind of solar electric supply, whether it's a direct supply on site or whether you're generating solar credits that can be used to offset your existing electric bills. And in some cases, and this project could be one of those cases, you can generate electric credits that you could use and sell them so you can generate revenue. Right now we don't have that in this plan, but that is an option. And this is showing that as you offset your electricity usage with these solar projects, at some point, if you ever went higher than the usage, you could always sell those credits, and you're not wasting it. And if you don't sell them, you can also bank the credits, which means they just stay on your account and they're available to offset future use. We did evaluate the available installations, or the most feasible solar installations, and the ones we show on here is in the Bromfield School roof, the Bromfield parking lot canopies, the police station roof, the landfill ground mount solar, and then this gravel pit ground mount. I also didn't mention on the top several rows, those are the existing solar projects. This building is the only direct purchase building that we've bought a system for the town. There is also the elementary school, that's a power purchase agreement, and so that is being offset. That's offsetting the bills currently. And then there is one item on here called the Athol PPA. That is it's nothing to do with any work in town, but it's an agreement we signed years ago that issues credits and provides. We are an off-taker to that project in Athol, Massachusetts. As you can see, these projects are phased in. This is just a rough plan to see how would it compare to how would it offset the planned increase in electric usage. So in the end, at the bottom, it shows that there is some appetite still remaining in this rough estimate, but that's the overall plan. One thing that we also talked about at a previous session is that we don't list the Stowe Road 495 parcel as in this plan because that is being evaluated as a possible multi-town microgrid that's been in process, in the initial stages with a company called NextGen. The town signed an agreement of non-conditional letter of intent to look at that option. And that, for that program, there's a feasibility study that would be done through multiple towns and figuring out how to put this microgrid in. That's very preliminary stages right now. We don't really have a lot of detail on that. That's going to be worked on mostly over the summer. Any questions? And Ellen's going to make sure that whenever you talk, please talk into the mic. She said it's very difficult online to be on this video to be able to hear people unless you're talking into the mic.
Okay, so I'm just trying to map this to the maps. That over there is the gravel pit. The maps that you're showing there, is that the gravel pit where, right? That's a gravel pit? Yep.
Take the mic. Sorry. You have to take the mic too.
After all that, you gotta have a
It's
mic.
hard when you're
This is
home.
a better view of it.
Okay, so that's a gravel pit, and then this is the landfill?
No, that's the 495 parcel.
Okay, and that's not on your table there, right?
It's in the note at the bottom, right? Yeah. That's the parcel that I mentioned that's being considered for the microgrid project.
This is footnote 2 there that you were just talking
That's right. Yeah.
about. It's parcel 82.1. And,
Yeah, right.
Okay. And, I'm sorry. This is 495, right? So this is where Stowe Road comes here. And then what? We're down here?
Yeah, that's approximately right.
Stowe Road comes down. I can't line up the 495. That's
No,
my
you're-
problem.
You're right. It's about like there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Super.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Pete Jackson. Last session, Ahmed said that without SMART 3.0, the project wouldn't move forward. Is that correct?
No, it's without the federal tax incentives. There's two incentives for this project. One is the Massachusetts 3.0 program, and the other one is the federal investment tax credit, 30%.
How much is 3.0 give to the project?
That I don't have, but there's no risk in the short term in those credits, those incentives expiring.
Okay, if you look at the site for 3.0, the state site, it's this project would be ineligible for 3.0 because it's on the biomap as a critical habitat. So therefore ineligible. I think Conservation Commission would know what that means.
So it's not an identified area that is in the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, which is a state program that identifies certain areas where certain species that fall under those criteria have been located and confirmed by state biologists. But the gravel pit site does not fall under that umbrella.
It's on the critical habitat on the biomap.
I don't think it is. I mean, I don't mean to dispute your information, but we have that, actually. Tell me what you mean by the critical thing. Okay, because there is the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, NHESP, and we do have a map of what areas are included in that in the immediate vicinity. This is not included under that program, but if there is another program to which you're referring, we could certainly.
It's specifically on the 3.0. It's on the 3.0 site. Biomap, critical habitat, ineligible. So
Can you,
I'll show it to you.
yeah, maybe you could send that information.
And if you look on the,
What is this on, like, what are we looking at here?
It's a
I
ma-
understand that it's a map, but,
biomap from the state.
yeah, which represents what?
This is critical habitat.
And critical habitat is defined as what?
Core habitat, I should
Yeah.
say. Okay,
Okay.
I'll show you what it means.
Why don't we go on and
Yeah.
let me investigate this.
We'll do this together here.
okay.
No, you know what? Let me look it up on here. I can see what you're talking about, because I'm just not familiar.
Hey, Bill Scott here. I had a question about the numbers you just had up there. What's the top line municipal? Is that the town, or is that municipal buildings, schools, and so forth?
It's the entire town. Includes buildings, schools, town buildings, water, sewer, water.
I don't think you got my bill on there.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking municipal.
Oh, it's just municipal. That was
sorry.
my question. It's
Sorry.
not residential. Thank you.
Coming. Just walk so fast.
Okay, so I just looked up this core habitat that they're looking up. Specific designation from Biomap, that's a Massachusetts conservation tool created by Mass Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy. It identifies areas most critical for the long-term survival of rare species, exemplary natural communities, and resilient ecosystems across the state. It does not tell me what the limitations are. And then there are different types of cores, so I don't know which core it is either, that this falls under. I was gonna ask you on the landfill and the gravel pit, are those areas clear areas, or are they, is the forest like taking them back already, or what kind of situation are we looking at there for putting solar in?
For the landfill?
For both the landfill and for the gravel pit, do you know?
You have the picture. This is not really a great picture to see the trees, but there's some areas in the front, in the upper section that the DPW has used for trees and.
Entire parcel or layout of, sorry. The entire proposed layout is on the disturbed land. There are mounds of soil or rocks, remnants, etc., that extend well south of the proposed layout. The entire area is young trees. Yes, there are trees, but these are all, 20, 30-year-old, 5-inch diameter trees, having walked it multiple times. This is not, we specifically relocated the proposed layout to avoid older hardwood and more mature species. This is the gravel pit.
So you can see how heavily forested it is right in that. Use the microphone. People at home can't hear. I've been there and I know you can't hear. Yeah, so you can see from the photo array how heavily wooded the areas are. I mean, there's two separate.
It is definitely
photos that were
covered in vegetation, for sure. Yes, but forested, I think there
No,
are
there's
nuances
also, there
to
was a, what
forest
was the report from
definitions.
Land Gap? Was it Land Gap? And it talked about the percentage of hardwood and, pine. I mean, it was quite extensive. And I'm sure you've seen the report, right? What's the name of that report? One at a time here, guys. I'm doing my best. There you go.
Good evening. So Pete brought up a great point around SMART 3.0, and this is kind of where we've landed. Outside of going to the warrant articles, right, you have two sites that you're asking the town to vote on. One is the land known as the gravel pit, and then up further on Stowe Road, which is a 30-plus acre parcel. With Massachusetts regulations requiring now mandatory site suitability scoring, where all new solar projects must now submit a site suitability report using a state-provided mapping tool that Pete has brought up, that scores the site from 0, most suitable, to 5, least suitable on 5 criteria, and I'm not going to read the entire criteria. But we've taken the position, or I've taken the position, that this is rushed. This is a further evidence that I don't think we've done a site suitability study on either parcel, and you're asking the town on a vote to accept these two parcels as the new solar district, or however, the solar overlay district. I just don't know from a responsibility standpoint, I don't think we are being clear and transparent in all of the information, because it's not that what I'll say is that you are partly to blame for, but you're rushing. You're rushing. And it's tax incentives over tax incentives. We're telling you it's wooded. There's nuances on forests and not, but we've lived here for a long time, right? And had you done your homework, had you done the suitability report, which you haven't clearly because we're still on this landing point, I think the outcome may still be that it gets voted on for solar, because I think generally speaking, solar is a good thing. But the state has taken a position, don't kill the trees, don't knock out the trees. And what are you doing? And you're presenting stuff and issues to the town when the town selectmen want to ram this down our throat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I thought, do you want to address that? Do you want to address that? Okay, just asking. I'm just the runner.
So I kind of came to this late in the game. I've heard about this the other day. I live on Stowe Road, 267 Stowe Road. We've lived through the beautiful Pine Village across the street from me for 20 years, and I now live amongst no trees. I've been here for 30 years, no trees, and it's loud now, the amount of trees they took down between us and the highway, and the lights. I live in the city. I came out here to live in the dark, and I have floodlights from neighbors, but the ones across the street, I am not interested in seeing any lights or trees taken down. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know where this originated from, if they were a private company, or if you're coming to town proposing something where we can save some money. But I guess I need to learn a lot more about it, like how much acreage you are trying to clear up on Stowe Road. I don't know. I have a lot of questions, and I guess I need to learn more about this before May 2nd.
They've all been recorded. You can watch them on YouTube.
And just one final thing. At the end of the day, the cost savings that you've walked us through, you remind me again, it's 125,000, right, on a year-over-year basis, right? So when you look at the town in and of itself, there's 2,000 or so households, so that equates to about $75 per house, right? The town is willing to disrupt, okay, for $75 a household. Disrupt our community, right? Disrupt the land for $75 per house. That's shameful.
So there's a lot of things that were brought up, and speaking as a select board member, but as an individual select board member, here to help inform the situation. As I'm sure most all of you know, we are facing what has been very delicately referred to as a structural deficit. We are facing projected deficits over the next 5 years of, at start, 1 million and going up to 5 million, which is going to mean that we either have to find additional money or we have to substantially cut the town budget. Faced with that, the select board has taken the approach that we are limited in how many cuts we can make. There's a certain point where if we cut more, we will substantially cut into services or schools. Therefore, we have to raise revenue. This is one option for raising revenue, and it's sort of an indirect because we are decreasing our electric cost by engaging in this sort of activity. Out of the sites around town that we have access to as a town, with the exception of the landfill, which is not yet capped, and we fully intend to put a solar installation there and have always intended to. It was included in the overlay district ages ago, so that is on the planning board, but obviously can't be done until we go through the capping process. This is the most disturbed site. We have 3 other sites in town that are municipally owned. We have the gravel pit, we have the site on Stowe Road that is owned by the town, we have a piece of land behind Hildreth Elementary School that is called Small Land, and we have the landfill. There are no other substantial pieces of municipally owned land that are not currently under protection. Under protection is land that is owned by, under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, which cannot be taken out of protection because of state requirements. So that's simply not permitted except by an act of the legislature. So our options are limited. This site was chosen for this because it is already disturbed. And yes, there are trees. I'm sorry.
A little piece is disturbed. The majority is undisturbed.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to comment.
Yeah, everybody needs to not pick on everybody else. We need to have a sane conversation. We understand what's going, and this is why we've had this many, and we are listening what we can, but we need to be civil, please. Everybody's doing what they can. We're all volunteers. Do you want to add any more, Eve?
Well, I just wanted to add that part of it is definitely disturbed. Gravel has been removed from this site for a number of years. I mean, that is hardly untouched land. Yes, we can discuss exactly what portion of the 14 acres has been disturbed and what portion has not, but it is hard to make the claim that this has been undisturbed land because the town has been literally mining gravel out of it for years. That is why it's called the gravel pit. So, no, it is true. Gravel has been. Okay, all right, you're right.
Wait a minute. People are listening at home. I was one of them.
Okay, so you had talked about previous studies that were done. What I'm hearing from the select board is there are 3 positives to this. We have been trying for years and years and years to figure out how to recover unused town property. We've done it, we've tried it for affordable housing, we've tried it for, I could go down a list. I think there's been like 10 things since I've been here since 2011. I supported the community solar project that went in that I think went into a clear area at the time. And I can tell you, having been on the planning board, oh, that was emotional. You wouldn't believe how emotional that was. I couldn't believe it. So recouping land, okay, that's a good thing. The systemic budget problem? Structural, systemic, structural. I identified that in 2011 from reports that had been put out about that since 2000. We have been whistling past the graveyard on this deficit problem forever. So I'm all for let's fix our deficit problem, but this isn't the way to do it. And the return on investment on this, I don't think is worth it either. I do think absolutely you need to go back and look at the studies that have been done on these properties in the past. That I absolutely think needs to be done. And I'm a little disappointed to hear that you're not aware of those, but I totally get it. When I was on the planning board, I had to spend months and months going back and finding these reports that were done. So they're not easily accessible. We don't go back and look at them and use them again unless somebody takes the initiative to do that. That's
Hi, I am one of the abutters. So I've got a couple different things. I came in a little late, and oh, thought it was. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. So a couple different things I'll just mention is I've been there for 22 years, and perhaps some of you guys remember Tony Miraldo. He was my neighbor, and so gosh, more than 15 years ago, he worked with the town to make sure that the digging would stop removing trees. Especially behind where we live. And so the trees that are behind, that's part of my view, are 60-foot trees, deciduous, and 15, 20-foot conifers, and they were never dug up, and they were never part of the gravel pit in the sense of digging. So there are a lot of trees back there that haven't been touched. I would agree, it's a small area that was dug up. And it doesn't look like that anymore. In fact, when I went walking back there, I had to rethink where I was going when I went down there with the kids. So it's changed dramatically. I wouldn't call it a gravel pit anymore. It's a green area, and it's primarily forested. What I would like to hear from Select Board representative is, so one other item is I completely agree that we've had overrides for 22 years. In this town. So putting a piece of furniture in front of a hole in the wall will not fix the hole in the wall. You need to go back and figure out what your wants and needs are. So that's a completely different issue, and I actually find it rather offensive for you to suggest that this will help the problem. No, putting a piece of furniture in front of a hole in the wall will not fix the problem between wants and needs, and you folks need to figure out how to balance the budget. And that may mean cutting things. And as a parent who's had 3 kids going through the school system, and I see them getting rid of teachers but hiring management, there's issues that could be addressed. Okay, so that's a whole different subject. Having said all this, when you suggest this is the only thing we can do are these areas, clearly it's not, because in Athol, you're receiving benefits and credits from a solar field that's not in the town of Harvard. And I wonder, how did you find that area? And that's supposed to go on till what, 2030 or something like that? Why aren't there other areas like that? And my understanding from watching some of these meetings is that's what you want to do with the Stowe Road site that's larger, to clear cut that and have various towns being part of it. And so is the goal here to change the town of Harvard from being a conservation green area, stone walls, that's what's in the Michelin Guide, it talks about the picturesque stone walls, because it sounds like we're now changing and we want to be something else. And this is one of the first steps in, if you want to put truly a commercial entity in a residential area. And I think that's why when people do research, they're like, well, there's not a lot out there. Right, because it's a commercial entity and people don't usually put that in a neighborhood. And that's why you're not finding things, and that's why home prices are negatively affected. So please tell us about these other options that are clearly on the table that the town of Harvard are participating in Athol, and what other ones are available in other parts of the states where we don't have to clear cut 33 acres or clear cut 13 acres, because that doesn't make sense and it doesn't support what the Audubon Society is putting out. They're like, don't put solar where you have trees. So.
Understand the comment. The answer about the Athol PPA, that was, we were approached that at that time, the Athol system that they were putting together, they were looking for municipal off-takers, and that's how 2014, I believe. Yeah.
What's the option to continue that? Is there an option? Like, it says 20, I think it's a
2037, right? It's a 20-year system.
So it's
That's a good question. I don't,
Yeah.
you know, as we've explained on other PPA, this PPA, for example, was intended to be a 20-year PPA, and then that would be removed, but that's something we would investigate.
Are we the only off-taker on that?
No,
or-
there's multiple.
Okay.
So what about other possibilities for other locations around the state? Because clearly this is an incentive by the state, and there might be other possibilities rather than limiting it to the town of Harvard only.
It's worth investigation for sure. Yeah, I'm not aware of it.
So just to reiterate, because we're approaching this in a hasty manner, where your return on investment doesn't reflect, first of all, you don't know what the upscale investment requirements to hook up to National Grid, and you can potentially have an idea from whether it was Boxborough or Lincoln or Concord, what amounts they paid. We're approaching this in haste, and you will set a precedent in the town of Harvard by putting in commercial area in a residential area. And one of my concerns is, and maybe somebody already spoke about this, I'd love to see what the lease looks like, because I think it's critical that if you're requesting to sign a lease, we want to make sure if something falls through, someone else isn't just going to go up. You suddenly, then the town of Harvard can just have somebody come in and clear cut the whole thing and put whatever they want in there. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be ironed out before something is signed, so that we don't have a problem like they had in Western Mass, where they have a solar field by wetlands, and they're now, what is it, like 1.5 million damages that are having to be paid. I mean, that's really scary, and it just came due.
Do you want to respond at all? I'll try. There was an awful lot in there, so I'll pick out just a couple of things. You packed it in there. The structural deficit, as you have said and are correct, has existed for a long time. I have been on the select board since last May. Prior select boards have dealt with it in the ways that were thought to be appropriate. The current select board, I think is reasonable to say, is firmly committed to increasing revenue and decreasing costs. And the current budget, as you will all see at town meeting on the 2nd, has made substantial cuts, including in the school. I will, however, just note that school budget and town budget are distinct, and there is a firewall between them, as I'm sure you know, as parents in town. We have gotten the message that we need to deal with this, that the overrides are not palatable to the town, and that we need to find some way to address that deficit. At the same time, there is, I'd say, it's fair to say there's a sentiment that people don't want to cut the school, budget because that is one of the major attractions of this town, which, by the way, impacts property values. So we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a bind, I'd say the least. We have a very small commercial district. We have no infrastructure to support commercial development in our district, which consists exclusively of Air Road. So we are looking for other options. I understand that this is, as it's been described, if the town is not in favor of this, then it will not pass at town meeting. But we, and I think I can speak for everyone here, want to provide as much information as we have. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not trying in any way to not be transparent. So if there are other questions and information we can provide, like the item that Pete brought up, we will absolutely look into them. But bottom line is, we don't have enough money to run this town unless we have very substantial overrides going forward, as we have had in the past, but projections suggest they're far bigger. So we either deal with that or we find a way to approach it. This might not be something the town wants, but we thought it was important to provide the option for the town to weigh in on.
I'm just going to add a comment on the perception of this being a rushed process. This is the 4th public meeting. I can go through the list of shifts to the proposed design, meaning the location, the size of the system within this parcel, looking at other systems, phasing in how we have discussed talking about other parcels in addition to or separate from this opportunity. We have taken feedback and adjusted what we have gone back to the developer with because of this feedback from all of you, because we're your neighbors. We also care about very similar issues in the town. I'm happy to push back on the level of forestation on it and, whether it's defined as a disturbed parcel. Okay, putting that aside, I think to Eve's point, this is a conversation for the town. We're continuing to get good information. We will take back the point about the core habitat consideration to the developer and make sure that that is either eligible or ineligible. If it's ineligible, it will impact our decision of whether or not to move forward with this parcel, because the level of Smart 3.0 incentive that is for this project is significant. It is a significant factor that would impact the project financials. So I want you to know that we are taking it seriously, what we are getting from everyone here. Now, on the actual layout as proposed here, we have walked that portion of the parcel. I can guarantee that there is remnants of dumping. There are piles of gravel that has been put there. There are holes and pits from where gravel has been extracted. It is filled, yes, with plants, but invasives and relatively young species. Where there are older deciduous or taller trees, we have moved the proposed panels to accommodate not cutting those trees down. So I just want to say we are working to try and optimize within this location. Why are we trying to focus on this location right now? Because it is the one that we, as volunteers, as the town, can put the most energy into in advance of the federal incentive deadline. But I want to make the point that to the questions on feasibility and permitting, et cetera, what we are asking for on town meeting would not be a final go, no-go. If it passes, can you go to the chaos slide? Wait, but show the Ted Lasso one, because we added that one for fun. All right, just to add some levity to this, this is what we've got going on with a little process chart here. So I just want to point out the lower right. All of the lines connected to the red lines connected here are where we could pause or permanently pause, I'll put it that way, the project. And where town meeting is, notice there's 4 opportunities where we will do continued evaluation, including feasibility analyses on the parcel that could come up and say, this is not a good parcel. What we're asking for is the ability to move forward with feasibility studies, to invest money in the environmental review, in the permitting process, in the communication with National Grid. And if we get negative responses from those processes, the parcel will not be developed into solar. But if we get support, if those are positive, it very well could move forward. So that is, I want to be transparent that yes, if it's positive from the town and those different iterations, the project could move forward.
Really briefly, I just want to add one more comment to what Adam just said. As a piece of municipal land, I think you are all aware that it has also been considered for a housing development, which was rejected by the town, but it is a parcel that could be used for that purpose, which would reap us revenue if it was sold to a developer. A comment about Pine Hill Village, which is a 40B, and I'm sure you know the parameters around 40Bs that overcome some of the zoning, let's just say, without getting into the weeds of 40Bs. That's another use for this parcel. If, like I said, the town decides that we don't want to find revenue from this particular source, well, then it would be off the table. But housing has been considered. Selling it to a developer is certainly an option. We haven't talked about that yet, but it was talked about 20 years ago. So it's a question of what does the town want to do with this parcel going forward? And I think that's a legitimate question that we as select board are not making that decision. We're coming to the town and saying, here's an option, do we want to do it? One more comment on other developments and other pieces of sites, other sites that are an opportunity. We are looking into another sort of energy production arrangement with Next Gen Energy, these microgrids. We are way at the beginning stages of that. It's not even a letter of intent, it's a memorandum of understanding saying, we will begin talking to you with 5 other towns. I don't know where that's going to go, but the point is simply we're looking at other alternatives to generate revenue and also to meet our climate goals as a town, which have been previously supported. I'll stop talking.
Just a couple questions and a comment. What more, if we're looking at parcel 82.1, and let's say the town votes for this to pass, and it gets an overlay on that property, do they need anything else for Next Gen to proceed, or is that like a go for Next Gen to proceed? Because
absolutely not. Nowhere near a go. Just to be shouting it loud and clear.
so would you need more votes from the town to approve that parcel for other items? And then can I have it back?
Yes, I understand, but
Just to be really clear, the Next Gen thing is miles away from anything, like miles and miles and miles. We are starting a conversation. We have no idea if it will go anywhere. I have no details of exactly what. It is the beginning of a conversation. So flat no, it is not the go-ahead Next Gen. I don't know if that's something we want to do. We don't even know what it's going to look like. It is a large unknown at this point.
Well, can I add to that the this gravel pit project is on a warrant article for the lease, and so if there was a lease associated with the next gen project, then that would come back to town meeting. Finish, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been spending a lot of time watching a lot of meetings, every different committee meeting, trying to understand all the aspects of this process. And frankly, it's been a pretty big part-time job, And I can appreciate the idea that the select board has people that come and represent the select board in different meetings and pass the information and go back and forth. I think it's really important. I saw the Conservation Commission one that just happened the other day, watch the recording, not the one tonight, because I would have been there tonight, but the one from the week before. And they asked about parcel 82.1, what was the intention? And at that time, there's no project, but yet we've had a meeting with NextGen in January, where you were presented information. And I think just being really clear that maybe you aren't going to go forward with that, but say that to the Conservation Commission, to say that we had a meeting with NextGen on January 20th, because everybody can't be everywhere. And when you omit that from a conversation with a subcommittee, it's really important. It's important to have that information. And I knocked on all these doors so that the people can be here, so we know what we're voting for. It's super important. The only reason I've been involved is because I've been watching all this stuff, not because I got a letter in the mail, not because somebody knocked on my door. It's because somebody knows Pete that happens to know my next door neighbor who I just met and went on a walk for and got on an email chain about this stuff. It wasn't even posted, and I had shared with Amit last week that on the town's website for upcoming meetings, it was not there in both the public and the community. In the calendar, when you just look at the calendar. And that's important that it's there. And it's not there again today, this morning. So we need to be able to do a better job getting the information out so people can participate and be engaged when they need to be engaged. We can't expect everybody to be engaged all the time.
I just want to say I very much appreciate that comment. I even reached out to Amit and Brian because I wasn't seeing the event on the calendar. I don't think that was on them. I think there was I know there was a request to make sure it was on, but where on the town website, and if the town website is kind of providing comprehensive information, I will just say that's not inherently a project team challenge or ability to create a solution, but I think your points are very, very important. So really appreciate, one, your engagement and, being on all of these meetings, but very much hear you about that point.
I will take it. Thank you very much. Just for clarification, Misty did not knock on my door, but
where were you on that?
I know, but she knocked on Sally's door, and then Sally let me know. To this point on NextGen and lack of communication, this is my first meeting, so forgive me, I'm a little bit behind relative to some others here, but I don't understand the relationship between the various parcels. The gravel pit is, I think I do understand, we've been talking about that a lot. The 82.1 parcel affects me dearly and some of my neighbors dearly, and as Sally pointed out, we've suffered through Pine Hills, really suffered, and we're not looking forward to another clear cutting of multiple acres and heavy logging trucks for the next couple of years. Anyway, that point aside, I don't understand. I looked at the articles proposed for the meeting. I don't understand how the parcels are dealt with independently. We talked about NextGen. If NextGen is so, there's no maturity around that conversation and that's unlikely to proceed, does that mean the 82.1 thing is unlikely to proceed, or is that just, are those orthogonal to one another? And I don't understand if I look at the first article, Article 24, it talks about the gravel pit. It doesn't mention anything about 82.1, but then there are two more articles that do mention it. They're kind of gone together, and it's not as though I don't care about my friends up Stowe Road, and I'm focused just solely on my own backyard, but bear with me for a minute. If I were focused on my own backyard, do I need to worry about 82.1 as much as we're worrying about the gravel pit right now? And if so, can we subdivide those and take them one at a time?
So I'm really glad that you raised this question. I think that the articles are complex, and I will do my best to explain two things. One is NextGen is, I think it's reasonable to say we have no idea if anything's going to happen with NextGen at this moment. Okay, so we don't need to worry about NextGen. It's way down the road. The planning, so the articles, and I don't remember which one comes in which order. The one article that is the solar overlay district, the solar voltaic blah, blah, blah district, that's a planning board article that has to do with zoning. That means that they, the planning board, are asking the town if certain parcels can be included in the solar overlay district, which also includes the landfill and the solar farm, correct? So that's a bylaw change that the planning board is asking for, that those can be included there. The lease on the gravel pit, yeah. The parcels that are listed in the article, which are gravel pit and Stowe Road. No, landfill's already in the solar overlay. That's already there, right? So that was a previous version of the, so the amendment to the bylaw is to add two parcels, gravel pit and what I call Stowe Road and you're calling 82.1, but we're talking about the same thing, farther down. 56 and 82.1. Okay, you're better on the numbers than I am. I have like these names. Yeah, so that's what the amendment to the bylaw is proposing, okay? The other ones are already included. So it's just changing the bylaw, changing the language to add those two.
I apologize. I'm just trying to make a point to your point and not forget it. But from what you just described, there's no way from an approval process, a voting process, and the public's perspective to say, okay, let's go ahead with all of this process on the gravel pit and forego for now 82.1 and separately address that. We can't do that.
So I'm going to make a suggestion, and haven't gotten perspective of select board or others on here. There is a way. So considerations from the state and considerations from the town, I'm going to try and piece those two together. There are constraints around, I forget the terminology, but basically spot zoning. So you don't want to, and is that the right term? You were on planning board, right? Okay. So you want to have multiple additions to a bylaw if you're proposing changes to the zoning bylaw. As Eve mentioned earlier, there's only so much land that is town-owned and that we would logically be able to propose as being potential sites for different uses. So the 82.1 is a town-owned parcel and was included in that. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It doesn't mean, X, Y, Z. But it was included because if we just put the gravel pit, that would be included. That would be likely to be considered spot zoning, and that is an issue from the state. So my recommendation, or for all of our consideration, not just folks joining the conversation, is there is an opportunity either prior to or during town meeting to propose an amendment to the bylaw that would suggest alternative parcels for consideration. And we could agree probably to prioritize already cleared land or other disturbed land or other parcels that are not under the current solar overlay district as being alternatives. Like, we want to take 82.1, take it out, and put in another one or two or whatever, knowing that they're not guaranteed to move forward with solar. But I would suggest, and I haven't walked the 82.1, so but judging by the satellite image, that does look like older forest, more well-established forest. So as a person who loves the outdoors, I would not want to see that one just clear cut for solar on a personal level. But I think that is something for the town to consider, is a amendment in town meeting or prior to for an alternative location.
Can I just add to that we referred to on previous sessions about the Massachusetts model solar bylaw, and in that document they referred to this issue about spot zoning because of a case in 2022, and they came out and they recommended that towns should be considering allowing solar by special permit only. And so that is something that when this bylaw gets, whatever happens at town meeting, if it gets approved, it goes to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General makes comments and makes adjustments, which you're probably familiar with.
So I'm gonna take you guys' side for a second. I've sat through a number of these meetings. I think other people have, when we talked about affordable housing and we talked about solar and we talked about over and over again, we talked about these different things. So every time the people show up and say no, that's what these meetings are. You show up and you say no. And then you tell the select board, this is not the right answer, go find another answer. Well, the select board's looked at lots and lots of different answers, and they've come to the town every single time, and people say no. At some point, we have to say yes. This structural deficit needs to be fixed. Somebody's going to have to say yes. I'm going to disagree with my neighbor here. I had no problem cutting down trees for putting horses on my property.
I noticed.
I had no problem with them cutting down trees to put the net zero Pine Hill buildings behind our property. In fact, when people started telling me about how you can't use a commercial district for commercial things because my house is there, Pineville was a way I could say, oh yeah, I can, because I put up with this, right? I said yes to this. So you can say yes to something. The town's got to start saying yes. They got to start saying yes to the commercial district. They got to start saying yes to reusing these town lands like the gravel pit. They got to start saying yes to things. Because we're kicking this can down the road and the problem is getting worse and worse and worse. And if all we do is protect the school and the trees, we're in trouble.
No, I'm going the other way. I'm going the other way. It's my job and getting my exercise and no dinner.
So I'm collecting comments. So back in November, at I don't know which meeting I watched, but Ellen had said, oh, be sure to notify the abutters on the gravel pit, or not, the wooded area behind my house. And so when they're doing hunting back there, I get a letter immediately saying, don't wear your Halloween deer costume out by the property line because they're hunting. I have yet to receive a letter about any of this, which means even though in November at one of the meetings, they said, you need to notify them, and none of us have been notified. And I don't get the paper. So that's not a legit way to say it was put in the paper. Or we have a meeting about it, but you didn't tell me about it. As you tell me when there are hunters in my backyard, basically, okay? And there's a danger of an arrow hitting somebody walking past. So that's offensive, and if you wonder why people might be angry when they start off, you didn't tell us anything. I think you made a very good point of endorsing why this has been in haste. Because when Pete talked about the core habitat, thank you, that should have already been known. You could find that on a map right away. And when you had your message up there, having the fire chief walk through there to give you an idea if it's a yay or nay immediately, that's telling me you are in haste. So you made a case for in haste. And when they put the budget numbers up there, and they didn't even credit or do the homework of what the costs were to be hooked up, looking at what the other towns to have a range to display to us, what that might be, That's in haste. That would just take a few phone calls to call. You haven't done that. I appreciate that you went back and moved things around to keep the large trees and things like that. I do appreciate that in your drawing. However, it's still showing an example that you're in haste when you have these other things that should have been done, which wouldn't require study, and you're saying, oh, we have to get an agreement before you do all these other things. No, you don't. You could have gotten some yea or nays. So you also haven't included the loss in the property values. Okay, and so that's something that's important. And you said there isn't a loss, but there is a loss for the abutters, for the neighborhood, for the area, because you've now made a change of putting a commercial district in a residential area. So I think that's important.
Ellen, I just want to respond. All right. Yeah, I'll go back and amend my previous point about being rushed or in haste. There is a deadline for 30% of the costs that would be recouped by if we can get a conditional letter of intent signed by July 4th. But we will continue to have opportunities and processes to evaluate whether or not this parcel is viable for solar beyond that. It gives us a window of 4 years instead of 1 year by getting a conditional LOI signed by July 4th. No, we don't have to spend 5%. What we have to do, and it's because of the sizing adjustment of the size of the system that we don't have to meet the 5% test. Or rather, we don't have to have there's a nuance there. We don't have to have an on-site demonstration of construction. So we don't need to have cleared land or fencing or what have you. But by signing the conditional LOI, Select, in this case, the developer, has already purchased the panels. So they've made the investment that would reach that 5% threshold. It's already been done, whether the panels go to Harvard or not. Yes, they would be allocated to Harvard. So yes, that gives us the safe harbor, but Select needs to show that they have a off-taker in order for those safe harbor panels to qualify for the investment tax credit. And that's where the conditional LOI comes in. Does that make sense? Okay. So, all right, on the rushed haste process, we are moving fast to get to that conditional LOI because of that ITC deadline. However, as I think we've talked about, we have been iterative, and you acknowledge this, we've been iterative along the way based on feedback from the town. We are taking into consideration new information that's being raised, and that will play into the process of whether we get to a final yes or no or what have you. So yes, there is an urgency, but I don't think we're being negligent in evaluating the project. I don't think we're being negligent in evaluating the project. I understand that may not be the position of everyone who is evaluating it, but we are earnestly looking at the considerations that are raised, how to address town financial considerations, best use of the land, etc. So I take back the, pushback that we are not acting in haste and not being rushed. Yeah, there is urgency to it. I wish there wasn't, but I think that is amended by the runway that we get post-town meeting to do further assessments on the feasibility of the actual project. I can when we have it. Yeah, sorry, the question was, can we show the lease proposal? Yeah, we don't have it yet. We don't have the draft lease yet.
We have the reference from the existing elementary school solar project, but it's just the standard contract type of lease. I know that there's been references to what kind of conditions will be in the lease, but that's really something that has to be worked out.
So thank you. And I do appreciate the feedback, and we do see the changes. So thank you. My question is this. Now that we've all spent time working on this, let's say it passes, is there an opportunity for that to change or get bigger? Now, once we've all worked on this, will potentially Select come back and say, really, this 1.4 isn't going to work for us financially. To make it work, we've got to get 3 or 1.7 and make it bigger. Now that we've all kind of been working together to get where we are, once that warrant, and if it goes through, you guys have the option to just change it, right? Without any more discussion, any more, is that, are you giving me your guarantee?
That's a great question.
How are you going to vote?
The select board can probably make an additional comment, but I will say that I would not support changing it for the bigger or adding back in components like the battery, given that that is feedback that we've gotten from abutters and the community. I think that's my take. Happy to pass it to others for perspective on that one. But I think that's a great question for sure. Yeah.
I think that's a legitimate concern. Speaking for myself and not for the board, would feel that it would be disingenuous after all of this to make those sorts of changes. And I feel like it would destroy any remnant of trust that we as a board have with the residents of the town. Now, that said, I don't know if there's something legally that would prohibit us from doing that, but I would feel that it would be an ethical violation after sitting here in front of you all to do that as one person on the board for probably only 2 more years at this point.
If you make it that long.
Pete Jackson again. I'm going to go back to the first question about Smart 3.0. If this project's not eligible, and that's the way I read all this, is the project still viable?
I don't have the dollar value for the Smart 3.0. We know that they usually rate it by per kilowatt, a rating of the system, and there's a whole methodology they go through about which ones qualify and which ones don't. So that hasn't been, we don't have that information right now, but I think you're asking, we already said that the investment tax credit, if that doesn't come through, then the project is not viable. So how does the Smart 3.0 credits compare? I think it's lower, but.
Yeah, the Smart 3.0 is about 1/3 of the amount of the federal tax credit. I think what we have done a sensitivity analysis is less than what the Smart 3.0 amount is. So it would definitely reduce the annual return or savings to the town. I think that would be a point of discussion that we would want to have with folks is that worthwhile or not? I don't think it inherently takes it off the table, but it definitely impacts whether or not it makes sense.
Well, even if it still goes forward, you've got this designation of a core habitat on that property and surrounding property. You also know that it's a highly productive aquifer and a high recharge area for groundwater. So you have all these things that we won't see analyzed until it goes through the permit and review process. My thinking is it is a little bit rushed, and I think the town ought to independently find a consultant to help them analyze this before you move ahead. Also, I'm going to just, I don't want to make Ellen run around again, but there's a comment about the language on the Warren article about the lease. Would a friendly amendment to that article say limited to no more than 1.4 megawatts be acceptable to everyone?
As an individual, I was going to toss out that maybe prior to town meeting, that could be a agenda item for select board or something aligned with your suggestion. I don't think that's an unreasonable idea.
That's a good example of a lease condition, right?
So just a procedural response, the warrant is closed, so we cannot change it. Any changes, potential amendments can be made on the floor at town meeting, but there is no further opportunity to change the language. So we can't do that. We've closed it. It's like literally at the printer, like the hard copy thing. Whether or not that would be acceptable is a vote at town meeting. So, amendments can be floated, friendly or unfriendly, and, well, no, seriously, like they're called. Right, and then it becomes clear that, but whatever, I mean, I'm saying that these are all reasonable things that are certainly can be proposed on the floor, and the town will vote on it.
And I also wanted to follow up on this slide right here about the financials. Adam referred to the sensitivity analysis. He's referring to the fact that this came up at the last session about what kind of contingencies do you have in the assumptions in the financials. And we went back to select and identified if there was another $250,000 of study impact or other effort that had to be expended, how would that impact the total financials? And the original, the current estimate is that the 20-year value would be $2.37 million, and that's approximately 120 per year, and that would change to about $2 million total, so back down to about $100,000 a year.
And this was a topic raised in this conversation as well of what the engineering costs and other potential or currently unspecified or unknown costs are. And from what Select shared with us, if there are, this is very much the process of value engineering for a project design. This could be taken in a number of different ways that, and I'm not claiming what would or wouldn't be viable, but it would be a negotiation. So it could mean, are there other areas of the proposed design that could be lowered in cost? Are there more creative solutions where, is it town DPW staff time that's used instead of Select's subcontractor to clear land as a way of saving costs? So those are things that we can also adjust along the way, or could potentially adjust in order for the project to remain viable. But we would look to understand the implications of those decisions before making them, in order to understand if it triggers the go no go into the no go territory at any of those points.
So back to the Athol project, which it isn't specific to the Athol project. So what other ones are going around the state that the town has looked into? Because you talk about you're really searching after the revenue. And so I would assume that since you have that already going on and it's been very lucrative, what other places, because that doesn't require using municipal land. If you're not studying it, why not?
Accurate from what you shared earlier? So we just did, one second. Okay. The per kilowatt savings for the Athol project is about half of what the savings would be for something that we are directly leasing or or owned, which is not what we're considering right now. If we were to own it, it would be even more savings per kilowatt. Directly, although I just want to point out that there are people living in Athol who have to live next to various projects as well. And while we are Harvard residents, we are Massachusetts residents, we are residents of the country. And so, like, if we are buying into a project that is clearing land elsewhere, for me, that's significant. And I'm just using that as an example. I don't mean to.
I don't know if they cleared land for that. I don't know the history of that at all. There may be places where they're putting solar panels on top of other capped, sites. So I wouldn't want to make that assumption. I know when they had the Harvard Garden Solar individual arrive last week or whenever it was at the last meeting, he was talking about how quiet it was and where it was, but there are no residents abutting it. And it's in a commercial area. So yes, of course. So it kind of like, it wasn't relevant because we're talking about a residential area. And I agree, if there's someone else in another town, they have to make those choices. So maybe they're putting it in a commercial area, or you see them appearing in the clover leaves on the highways. So there's lots of other areas that have been cleared that those opportunities might exist. So this is why when you're looking at, if you just stated, which was helpful, if the cost increased $250,000, and if you then add in the loss of tax revenue, is this project still even viable if you're only going to make $50,000 to $80,000? Is it worthwhile potentially endangering species and working in a fragile ecosystem, and what you've done to set a precedent to have a commercial entity in a residential zone where literally you could be having children playing next to solar panels, basically, in sight view. And I know there's different spots, but that's the visual that you're giving.
Let me
in a residential area.
respond to your question about the Athol PPA. That's something that we've reviewed from time to time, but when it had occurred in 2013-14, within a 3-month period of time, we were approached by 3 or 4 systems that were being produced in the state. And it was just because of the situation, the environment in the state regarding these projects. And so they were all looking for municipal off-takers. And this specific one, the credit was much higher than anything that happened after that within that 3-month period of time. And then we were never notified again after that. So I think, to your point, there may be other projects out there, and we can do a better search for them to see what's available. I know that these systems, as they're aging, the credits are likely going down, even from the original, but it's something worth considering. But it seemed to be an isolated case at the time for such an attractive credit. That's all.
Bill Scott again. I came here, I thought we were going to be talking about, adding to the distributed generation of power in New England, which is the future, so that we can generate it closer to where it's being used and not have to keep building, big sets of wires like we're seeing in lots of places in Massachusetts. But I see these solar farms. I ride my bike around, and every once in a while, it's like, oh, there's another one. It is sort of the future. And I thought the gravel pit. I don't live next to it. I live down the road a mile, but it seemed like a good spot. But if what we're really trying to do is address the structural issues the town has with revenue, and we're looking at an asset, which is this 14-acre parcel or whatever it is. Why don't we encourage a 40B to go in there? And don't we get tax revenue from what gets built?
All right, hands up for who wants to support a housing development in this parcel instead of solar. Yeah.
So that was shot down pretty resoundingly in 2007 when it was proposed. To my knowledge, I actually didn't live here in town at that time, but yes, on the gravel pit, we have actual plans for it, and the town was not in favor of that. It is certainly an option. I mean, it would go up again in front of the town again, but it is an option. It would produce revenue, and the plans, don't bite me, were for 36 to 45 units. I didn't make them. So yeah, there are other uses for it. I also just want to mention, this is not the only source of revenue. This is, I'm just saying, like, we are on a mission to try to increase revenue, and that was direction given to the board by the town. This is one of our goals. So this is a small part of a bigger picture. Of course, we just want to grab Devon's and solve the whole thing. But if that doesn't work, and I'm saying this in jest, we either are going to pay more in property taxes or we are going to say yes to things. And we can choose among the possible yeses. If the town prefers a different yes, then we would go in that direction. If the town prefers to pay more in property taxes, then we go in that direction. I mean, I'm like a single person with my property tax bill, but we're trying to follow the will of the town.
I want to just add that when that study was done on potential housing, it was prior to the MBTA Communities Act being instituted, and that really just is adding a very explicit, direct pressure on the town to address housing as well. And so we're going to have some more meetings, folks, about where housing is going, and it's not going to be a question of if, it's where and what is most amenable to the town. I'm speaking as an individual and not, representative of certainly not the select board since I'm not on it. But I think that's a really great question. And then the other point that I didn't address earlier was the property value question. I've seen the studies that have been shared. I've also seen a variety of other studies that show a spectrum of property value impacts. So we can anchor on, on impacts that confirm or broaden our perspective on the potential impacts to our property values. There are some that show positive, neutral, and negative impacts. And I want to say, speaking as an individual, that property values are based on market conditions and market signals. Who is the market that is sending the signal? And I think you raised the point earlier. I don't know your name. I apologize. Tim raised the point earlier about, we can say yes to things. For what it's worth, I don't know that this is the solution, but if we're getting behind a certain thing, or if you're negative, but the town is behind a certain thing and you're kind of a byproduct of that, yes, being in a positive position about the implications of it could have less negative or even positive implications for property values. I can totally appreciate the concern about the unknown or uncertainty around property values. As a homeowner, I don't want to see property values go down for myself or anyone, but I just want to underscore that there is a range of data around the impact of proximity to solar, and I want to differentiate between broad commercial and what we are proposing because they are not the same. We're not talking about building an industrial factory. We're talking about putting a solar farm on a property for 20 years with removal afterwards.
Just a comment going back to the warrant article as it relates to parcel 82.1. What I would encourage our neighbors to the south of the gravel pit is to go back to a select board presentation where this organization presented and make your own judgment. The select board has signed an MOU. In one of the last slides, or the last presentation, the MOU, the 82.1 site was a potential 10 megawatt solar site. Okay, so just I would encourage you, and they aren't making decisions. True. Right? They're going to do these meetings if anything was to happen, right? If they wanted to move ahead with the MOU or with that parcel, all good. But I think it's incumbent upon those abutters, those residents, to make decisions for themselves and see what Next Gen had to offer. And I will say, again, make your own judgment. And as it relates, by the way, we've been here for 23 years. We lived through the 36 to 40 unit proposed subdivision. The gravel pit, listen, it's pick your poison. Do you want the solar garden? Do you want excessive housing? We get that there has to be, there may be something there. We're asking for you guys to just take your time and review it. That's it. And at the end of the day, no one talks about everyone talks about, well, it could be 40B, it could be 40B. True, sure. It's a 61-foot entrance into the gravel pit. You can't fit a fire truck or two-way lane into it, and there's no other egress out unless you went into Gail's property, which I don't think she's going to give you. So on that note, back to you.
Fully support everyone making their own judgment on this and using their judgment to cast a vote when it comes time to do so. I do want to offer a correction on that point. What Next Gen is proposing, which is, again, not the primary topic of discussion here, has to do with aggregating primarily battery capacity, which across multiple municipalities for the economics to work should get to 50 megawatts. Okay? Now, we're talking about 5 towns, approximately 10 megawatts each. A battery facility is entirely different than the land that would be occupied by a solar system. We would, in aggregate as a town, if Next Gen move forward, be adding 10 megawatts of battery capacity at multiple locations. And that would include, or could include, emergency sites like COA, town hall, schools, etc. So let's call that 2 megawatts just for back of the envelope math, and a potential underutilized site. As an individual, I wouldn't 82.1 would not be my first choice for that. But I think, again, the question is, it's currently in the warrant. We can't edit the warrant until we get to town meeting. Friendly amendments or, proposed amendments during the town meeting are on the table. But the point that I really want to emphasize is that the Next Gen proposal is not inherently talking about solar. It is more fundamentally talking about grid capacity and flexibility, which could or could not include solar, but is more focused on batteries. And for what it's worth, the investment tax credit on the federal side for batteries doesn't expire until 2032. So there's a longer runway there. Sorry, I just wanted to make that quick amendment to it.
A question about Smart 30. When does that expire?
There's no expiration date that we were, as far as we explained, but if you look at the history, I don't know how long they usually last. They go from one phase to the next, and maybe it's a year or 2 years or some I don't know the time period.
So So it's still going to be available down the road a year or so
Right.
more?
That's my understanding. I think it's based on when the funding, how long the funding lasts.
So you're jumping at the opportunity for this year, but you could wait till next year or the year after and get on Smart 30.
Or the Smart 3.0, that's right, yeah.
Okay.
But the urgency doesn't have to do with the state incentive. It has to do with the expiring federal incentive. It's more of a bonus that we also get the state incentive. And going back to the adjustments that we've made, we've downsized the size of the solar system so that we get the bonus 3.0, the state Smart 3.0 incentive. Again, going back to your earlier point, we will go back and confirm eligibility or not based on the core habitat, but
My question is now on Smart 30. When does that expire? You said you didn't know. It could be down the road a couple years.
You're referring to Smart 3.0, right?
No, Smart 30, the federal incentive.
Oh, you're talking about the federal incentive, but
the federal incentive, sorry, it's a different, or I'm not familiar with it as Smart 30. It's the federal investment tax credit, but so when does that one expire? So there's two phases that are currently still in play. You can either complete a project by the end of next calendar year and not need to deal with safe harboring. So that's one possibility. But because of the expected construction time frame for this, we would likely go beyond the end of next year before construction's completed. As we've talked about, we still have a lot more feasibility studies to do, et cetera. So in order to give us an additional runway, the other possibility is there's a deadline by July 4th, 2026 to safe harbor, which we can qualify for with a conditional LOI, and that gives us a 4-year time horizon to achieve project completion.
So if we decided, which I would hope, that the town does its own independent studies before we hand it over to Select, could we come back, say, a year from now and still get the tax incentive?
No.
So when does the tax incentive go away? I guess that's the question.
If we sign the conditional LOI or if we don't, just to clarify your
If we
question.
don't, and then say next town meeting, even in the fall special town meeting, we decide,
yeah, we'd
okay,
miss
we're
it.
ready to sign a lease. Is the federal tax incentive still available?
Off the table.
So then it ends this year in July?
All right, so if we had this on special town meeting in the fall and there was any potential to utilize the federal tax incentive, it would require us to achieve project completion, meaning all of the permitting, interconnection, and turn the system on before the end of 2027. What we're proposing is an additional, effectively 3-year time horizon to achieve project completion. If we moved this to fall town meeting or the spring and happened to approve it, but didn't complete construction by the end of 2027, we would not be eligible because we wouldn't have safe harbored the project by July 4th of 2026.
So there's something in the federal incentive that says you must have it, in our case, a lease signed by July 4th, 2026, or forever you've missed your opportunity.
With the exception of achieving project completion by the end of 2027.
I mean, suppose we wait till next year. Can we sign a lease and get the tax? So, in other words, the federal program dies this year for us.
Yeah, and if this was a year and 3 months ago, that wouldn't have been the case. It would have went on till 2032, but we've had some changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is an area I work in and am working across the country to try and evaluate good projects, whether they're good or not, and move forward, because these are huge amounts of money that are effectively being left on the table or terminated. And there is a really big question mark about how you can get projects to pencil in the absence of federal dollars. Private capital markets are not solving it. Impact investment is not solving it. I'm looking at international capital sources right now. We're talking about like IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Bank money, because it's long-term, lower-cost debt. I mean, not for the Harvard project, but like, yeah. Yeah, we're going to the UN tomorrow, guys. No, but to just take the severity of the circumstances that we are facing, you know, we being community development projects that connect to climate and resilience, it is a really challenging time because there has been a significant pullback of resources that were being planned around for years. So, very good point and question.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but since completion of the project by the end of 2027 is effectively impossible, the only way to get the investment tax credit is to have a letter of intent by July 4th. And the only way to get the letter of intent is if we approve adding these 2 parcels to the solar overlay district, because adding only 1 parcel would be spot zoning and we'd be shot down. So in order to get this, we have to at least pass the zoning change. Passing the zoning change does not oblige us to go through with the project. In fact, the letter of intent doesn't oblige us to go through it, but it presents the opportunity for getting the federal tax credit. Is that correct?
Yeah, conditional LOI, and there was another point that I'm blanking on. Yes. Generally, what you said, the other point was it doesn't inherently have to be these 2 parcels. We talked about the at town meeting friendly amendment. I just want to, again, open that up as that is a window of possibility. It could be other parcels, but otherwise you're spot on.
My understanding of your comment on spot zoning is it has to be at least 2 parcels. It doesn't have to be these 2. Or no.
I don't think it was stated as a requirement. It was stated as a good thing to be able to add multiple parcels to eliminate that spot zoning concern, right?
Okay, so first of all, thank you. That was great. On the spot zoning, I'll just real quickly, we have an overlay district already. And so this would be adding to the overlay district, so it would be less of a spot zoning problem, big time. I'd like to make 2 requests or recommendations, puts a little more work on you guys. Can you go back to your slide where you had all the, yeah, excellent. Put timeline on this so that we can see when you think these A, B, C, D, and these X's are going to occur, put a timeline on that. Add to this also when the incentives go away, right? And when you need to sign things. So, you know, a project plan, basically, right? And if you have a critical path, great, you know, but this works for the town, I think. But I need a timeline, and I need to see, you know, when you need to make decisions, right, for our votes. The second recommendation I'd make is put all of this on your website. You've got a committee website, right, for the town? So make this available, link to the CCTV, Harvard CCTV meetings, recordings, so that we can get those easily and watch them. I think that'll help you in communications, right? And allow us to go back and look at all the work that you've done and what's previously been discussed. Thank you.
The previous public sessions are on the website, and they also include a version of this slide with the timeline on it. It doesn't necessarily get into the details on the ITC expiration.
Misty, wait.
Oh, okay.
What was the question? Can you repeat?
Sorry?
Are you answering? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to go back to something that you raised. Apologize, I don't know your name. Ruth. Recognizing that you didn't get a mailer yet, are there ways that come to mind for folks that we can do better in terms of making sure folks are aware, guiding them to what the resources that we'll make sure are available on the website? What would be helpful just to inform your decision in advance of town meeting, other than, having meeting notices and so forth? There are going to be information in the press and so forth, but are there things that we might be missing that are really important? Sorry.
I just think it's really important too, because for trust, it builds trust. And that's like the most important thing that you can have on your side, is that those first steps, So when those first steps are just kind of like not there, you're already starting on a, rocky foot. Mailers, putting it in people's mailbox. I know that in marketing, you actually have to say it 7 times before people actually start to take action. So whether it's lawn signs, where they put lawn signs by the general store, whether you put it above the banner, where they put sports stuff sometimes, emailing the lists, which I know there's some trouble between committees on, you're on this list but not on this list, where people can opt in. The press, so that's got to be at least 5, right? Instagram, I don't know. Yeah, next door.
We put it on the climate site.
So I think a lot of trust, at least from my personal perspective, has been lost, and lost more by watching these meetings. And then I come in and I hear something different, and then I watch another meeting and hear something else different, and then talking about those NIMBY folks out there. And I'm like, well, if you'd actually come and talk to me initially, maybe you wouldn't be calling me a NIMBY, right? And so I did express things, and you folks made changes, and I certainly appreciated it. And I think that there was maybe, hopefully, some learning on the part of Select when they realized that, yes, there's 60-foot trees in there, and it's not a gravel pit anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time. So, and Ellen had pointed out in the meeting, I saw you back in November, why don't we inform the abutters? Yeah, and the neighborhoods. And when we look up at the costs, when they show, it costs the town nothing. Well, clearly, you haven't done your work, because it does cost the town, because I'm part of this town, and there's neighbors part of this town, right? And there's these other costs. So yes, I think you need to send out a letter and inform them, hey, this is going on. These are when meetings are. You can also find more information on the town website. Here are the links. Here are the documents. They'll be continually updated as we progress forward. This is how you personally can provide feedback. This is how you can do different things. And to me, those would be very standard, normal things. It sounds like you do this in real life too, not just in a town, like your real world job versus this other job that takes none of your time. So I think that's where, you've got an educated town here where they look and see, gosh, when we do our projects, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on and we don't see any of it. And then we're told, oh, we'll do that after we sign the lease.
Can join the Harvard Climate Initiative e-newsletter and you can get it all.
I will admit that there are probably limitations in how the town communicates. I will say, on the other hand, we're a pretty small town staff. I'm not saying this as a defense, but I'm saying it is a volunteer government, and some of the things are not as well organized as the private sector, and we don't have the resources to honestly do everything to the level that would be ideal. So I'm saying we can do better, and I've heard some good suggestions, and I can absolutely take them to town administration and make suggestions. But not everything, I think to be realistic, not everything that is being suggested can be done. And, you know, the suggestions are good. There are probably much room for improvement in the communication so far. And we'll take the feedback to heart. I agree the town website would be a good start, and I would only sort of in defense of the town say it was just redone, and I think it launched last August. So there is still pieces that are being put together. There are still suggestions. Town staff is stretched because because we're constrained in many ways. So I'm not saying it's a defense. I'm saying I am cognizant of the constraints and the limitations that we have and that we're operating in, and I will take your suggestions.
That's enough. Wait, who?
Well, I think that's a good point of why this isn't
Whoa. I'm going to push this no matter what.
Thank you. So I think you made a good point in why this looks like it's being done in haste. As you mentioned, people are doing this as volunteer positions, and not all of the things have been done in a timely manner. And so I think that's a really good point of what you're saying, and this is one of the reasons why it's done in haste.
I was not in any way saying it was done in haste. I completely agree with what Adam said about the urgency based on the expiration of the investment tax credits, and that what has driven the timeline here. I was simply saying that the suggestions for communication are, in my mind, closer to what is done in the private sector, and I'm not saying we can do all that. I'm just being realistic about promises. I was not in any way saying this was done in haste. I disagree with that statement. I think that this has been done in an appropriate way to take advantage of an opportunity that's expiring. But I think some people might disagree with that. But I was not saying that the lack of letters going out, or whether it's on this website or that, in any way has to do with haste.
I understood that the town was understaffed.
No, I was not saying that.
Oh, okay. I understood that you were suggesting that the town didn't have enough people to do certain things, and so it was hard to get things done.
No, I did not mean that.
Administrator. We are down an administrator. I'm coming.
So on the communications, I'll offer a couple of things that have worked in the past. I agree 100% that we usually have about 3 things that we do. We try to get in the Harvard Press. We try to get it on the town website. When I was on the War Restoration Memorial Committee, I actually got an account on the town website so that I could update that website. And I use that as my marketing tool, really, for that effort. So you can volunteer to help out with that kind of stuff and updating the website. The other thing that I saw was when we did the elementary school, and we had a very energetic set of volunteers going around and making sure everybody knew what was happening with the elementary school, going around and knocking on doors, you know. So that's another thing. If you want to create a kind of volunteer committee, right, to get the information out, we need a couple of people from north, south, you know, east, west, center to kind of take on that role. That Shannon does a really good job of letting us know stuff. So that's another thing is you kind of can help with, you know, if this is something you're interested in, right? You know, just like you did, Misty did, right? So I appreciate that, and I want to encourage other people to do that because we are a small town.
Yeah, I've heard over and over the fact that you didn't want to do the environmental studies or have any of the studies up front. before the vote takes place for financial reasons. But the problem with that is that if you don't have concrete information for the town to make its vote, they're actually making a vote in a vacuum. You know, it's sort of like, and they're going to fall back on that myth that solar energy is a wonderful thing, and it is a wonderful thing. Everyone in this room believes that solar energy is an important thing to combat climate change. But without those studies and that information, you're going to have a lot of people in this town thinking, yeah, it's really good, we're going to vote yes. And so then we get in a position where I think Ruth and Misty were saying, if the vote goes through, and you've had a lot of upfront meetings with us, and we've aligned our concerns, announced our concerns, then you don't have to really listen to us anymore. You can go forward with a larger project. And I know I've heard you say that you wouldn't think that that would be fair dealing and a responsible thing to do. And I appreciate that. And I hope that we can hold you to that when this vote goes through, because the town's probably going to vote it through because everybody likes solar energy. We don't want to all of a sudden have 10 acres again on the map for the project. You've been saying it's 1.4. So.
1.4 megawatts, 3.5 acres, approximately. I mean, what's coming to mind here is the framing of the vote. What the vote is and what the vote is not. And I think it's incumbent upon us, being, project team, whatever, however defined, and folks who have been engaged and have more knowledge than others who haven't been paying as much attention. And so I hope that you and everyone here can understand that what we are voting on is the ability to move forward in further evaluation and the ability to lock in the federal incentives. We are not giving a go, no-go on the project. We are enabling further evaluation. And you shared the full understanding of we can't move forward with environmental reviews or engineering analyses because we haven't signed a conditional agreement that gives Select the confidence that we're more serious. Yeah, they can't spend money without that in place, and we can't do that without support from the town. So I think what you're saying is really important around how the vote is framed, what it is and what it is not.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, so I have a question and a comment. One comment I want to mention, Brian, I really appreciate when I watch the Energy Advisory Committee meetings and you talk about the COA information sessions that you've had and how you've appreciated the engagement by people. I think that's really appreciated that you appreciate our engagement. And so I just want to say that example over the committees, because, we are residents that happen to abut, that it's not necessarily, it's to be engaged, and everybody can't spend time on everything. And so they're going to come out at certain topics that are going to be either of interest because they have kids or because they like Parks and Rec or because something might be going in their backyard. I think we got to remember that these are our neighbors and, that people can be engaged to certain levels at certain times of their life, and they may not be able to all engage equally. And so just wanted to say that I appreciate you framing that as not like angry abutters. Next thing is that I know on the warrant it talks about a 30-year lease, but I know the Select is like 20 years. What do you think might happen with those 10 remaining years? Would it be like we might extend or, put another solar, or, you know, like, because why not, once it's in, it might be in and maybe it's 20 and then it's 40, which is fine if that works, great, but just kind of curious on your perspective on that.
I believe the warrant says up to 30 years, is that right? Okay.
So typically, agreements would be done for 20, some are done to 25 for solar. The typical structure, if it's 20 years, would be with the option to continue beyond that. And if there was a desire not to continue, it would, you know, trigger deconstruction and removal of everything and kind of move back to natural habitat. There's also degradation of the efficiency of the panels that I think, one, it's modeled around in terms of like where we'll likely be at in 20 years. So I think that would certainly be a consideration. I can say at 20 years or approaching 20 years, I would want to look if I'm in a position to evaluate what to do at that point. I would want to look at what's the efficiency of the panels that we're currently at? You know, is it still achieving savings to the town? What else has happened in the grid and energy landscape? Are there better options, you know, present for the town to consider? And I can't say for sure what the process would be at that point, but I think it would be a reasonable point to re-engage with the town on whether or not extending is the right move or not. But that's just my current off the cuff thinking on it.
Yeah. Can we move to slide 5? This was a question that has come up a few times about the procurement process, just to make sure we're clear on how it works. So the Power Options is an organization that we've engaged with, that we went through this process when the elementary school. They have an arrangement where they went out to bid, and this was they worked with the state. The state authorized this process. They went out to bid at the time. They vetted all of the responses, and Power Options selected Select Energy as the winner of that one specific bid. But then going forward, that means that municipalities don't have to go out to their own bid process, because it's time consuming and it's costly. The advantage of that, other than time and the cost, is also that Power Options provides oversight throughout the process. So they establish pricing rules that Select has to follow, and then on a regular basis, Power Options goes out to the market and gets and validates those rules with the latest information, and then they update those pricing rules, and then Select has to meet those pricing rules, and Power Options does audits every project that they're involved with to make sure that Select follow those rules. So that's something I think is valuable to the town for those two reasons, and that's what we're taking advantage of.
And prior to being aware of the Power Options structure, when the expiration of the solar tax credit was top of mind, and I got involved in this, what turns out to be the gravel pit project, I reached out to a couple other companies that are active in Massachusetts, and they directed us to Power Options and Select because of this structure already being in place. So while we didn't do a formal RFP process, they said this is the trusted process, particularly for municipalities, for what that's worth.
And we've used them twice before.
Yeah.
It's on HES, and it's also on this building, and was successful.
So in one of the energy meetings I watched, it sounded like, and correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, that Select Energy was the only one that bid, and that you'd requested some other ones and they didn't want to do it because it was too small? Or was it, so Select was the only one, even though that's not their priority? They usually do the roof and the canopies. So I was just curious, what was the reasoning why the other companies were not interested in doing that work?
think you're referring to when we went to Power Options and recently and asked them, because we knew that they had experience with all of these other bidders. And we asked them and they said, and we explained the situation and they recommended that we go with Select. And they didn't really go into a lot of detail at the time. They only had two, I think, at the time that they would have put forth for this project. So I guess it's not, I can follow up, find out for certain. Yeah. I know that, I think we mentioned before that there was some work on this project earlier, and the reason for the delay, there was a period of time where Select, we started initially with Select, and then they decided that there was so much uncertainty in the interconnection environment with National Grid that they were not going to invest time and money into this project in this town or any project in this town because of the issues in the grid, that they might invest several years and then find out that the project was going to get disapproved, or the cost would be so high that it wouldn't be viable. Right, and that's one of the things we mentioned in the earlier sessions, is that the environment in the grid has changed to a more favorable environment for interconnection.
I know it's getting really late, but I just wanted to focus back onto the landfill. I think I understand better now that you have to enter into a lease by July 4th, and you also have to have expended 5% funding, and Select already has done that by buying those panels. So I was wondering if you crunch the numbers to see what that 30% federal incentive would do to installing a solar array on the landfill, combined with the amount of money that Select would have to spend to clear cut and level and establish a solid base in the gravel pit. All that money could be applied to doing all this on the landfill and having a much bigger, power source than our little gravel pit, which is now 1.4, whatever it is, megawatts. So.
Hi, and I think we do need to wrap up. People are meandering home. The landfill is not available for a solar installation at this point. The landfill needs to be capped. That's a process. It is a costly process. In order to cap the landfill, we need to move the transfer station, which is currently sited on top of the landfill. In order to move the transfer station, we need to find another location for the transfer station, which is a highly regulated process. You can't just plop a transfer station anywhere. There is part of the transfer station, part of the landfill extends to under where some components of the DPW building. This is not a simple process. We do intend eventually to use that for a solar installation, and it in fact is very favorable in that way, because when we cap the landfill, we can grade it in a way that makes it all face south. I mean, that's a very desirable place, and many communities have done that, but that's not something we can do now at all. The landfill is not even in a state ready to be capped. So I just want to make sure people understand it's not an either or at all. It's a both in the plan or in the vision, and the landfill is down the road when we solve multiple other problems that are related to everything having to do with capping that correctly.
Here's the opportunity.
Are there other questions? On the, we mentioned on Sunday, April 26th, the plan is to have a tour site walk of the Harvard Solar Garden in the early afternoon, and then followed by a site walk of the gravel pit. So you can go to the solar garden, see what this type of installation would be, a similar one, what it would look like, and then see how it would fit and help everyone assess the gravel pit project and provide other feedback. Then one more note I have for everybody is I am impressed with the amount of engagement and the amount of research and the amount of information that everyone's been bringing. And I will remind you that the town runs on volunteers, and there's a lot of open volunteer positions. And the Energy Committee only has 3 members, and there will be 3 open positions. But I know that that's an ongoing issue throughout the town.
And Climate has 2 open associate positions.
And we just had an opening on the Town Charter Review Committee, too. So happy as a Finance Committee member to, put somebody forward. So, yeah. I'll just echo Brian's point. It's because of the appreciation for being a community and neighbors that all of the feedback is helpful and taking it into consideration. And if the evaluations ahead of us turn out that the project isn't viable, it's not going to happen. And that is going to be based on feedback and further analysis and additional guidance. But anyone who has been impacted in a positive way because of the process, I think I would appreciate and encourage folks to amplify that as well, even if you're not fully there yet. Just, it's helpful from our perspective of, being on the project evaluation committee. Yeah. Ellen, turn it on.
Just a question, when we do the walkthrough for the gravel pit, at some point someone had mentioned having it like roped off or flagged somewhere so we can visually see where it is. Will that happen at that point? Or has it happened yet?
It's partially happened. We're going to go back and update it based on the new designs. So if you see me and, a couple of
Our dog will be barking at you probably. He'll see you go down there.
Bark away.
Say, stop, Abraham.
We'll be
sit.
sure to do tick checks. Maybe I'll bring a cooler of beer if anyone wants to hang out by Stowe Road or whatever. But yeah, the intent is for it to be outlined in some fashion. Yeah.
I'll add one other thing too. I mean, let people know that this is on YouTube and you can watch any of this one and the prior ones. That's how I knew when I couldn't hear questions when I wasn't here. And I do put that out in our e-newsletter to Climate. We have been trying to put that out. We have about 600 people on that list. So, I mean, they may not be in this room. They may be watching. We don't know. But we do let people know. And that's a good portion of the town.
Thanks, y'all. Hope to see you on the 26th.